Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the PMO Fifth Annual Global Conference. And this time, so we have Jenny Fowler. Jenny Fowler, she's a
Tony, I
CEO.
can't I can't hear you. Can
Hold on a
others
sec.
hear?
Uh,
I see there's
yeah,
22 people. You
yeah,
can hear him. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Can you hear
Can you
Jenny?
hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the fifth annual Visual Global Conference, the PMO Leader, Future Ready PMOs. And this morning we have Jenny Fowler. Jenny Fowler, she's the CEO of Strategic Influence Consulting. She's a thought leader in the PMO space. Global speakers are always listening about Jenny, and she's a well-known person in this space. So we have her sharing an interesting topics about change isn't a work stream. So Jenny, it's all yours.
Okay, Tony, I noticed you stopped talking. Interestingly enough, we were just backstage and I could hear him fine, but now I can't hear you. So is it time for me to start?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Perfect. So good morning, everyone. And I just want to check, will someone confirm in the chat window that you can hear me? Yes, perfect. Okay, we are ready to go. All right,
Mhm.
and also I am sharing my screen. So Tony, all I see is myself, and you can everyone see the presentation as well? Crystal
No,
clear. Can't see the presentation. Is there something else that I need to do, Tony? Sorry, give us just a second. No, so the presentation.
just sharing.
Is there something that you're doing on your side, Tony?
No.
Okay, so let me just stop. I will reshare. Let's just do it again. I'll reshare my screen. So stand by, my friends. We've got this. We do. We have this. Maybe it just because I had it shared backstage. So it looks like it's thinking. So while that's coming up, I will go ahead and introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I know that Tony gave me an intro. So Jenny Fowler here, coming to you live from South Carolina here in the United States. And I'm really looking forward to our topic today, which is, as you see, change isn't a work stream, it's the work. And forgive me if you see my eyes floating because I've got three different screens here trying to watch the chat window, looking at the presentation. So you may see my eyes floating around a little bit. So, transformation looks perfect on paper, right? Until people get involved and projects can hit every delivery metric that you could think of. And then the delivery side might still lag, the people side might still lag. So change isn't extra work, it is the work. So we'll hop in. And again, I'm really thankful to be here. I've been here a couple of times now at the annual conference. So, and if any of you are going to be at the PMI conference in November, I will be there. So hopefully you can find me and we can shake hands and maybe have our photo made together. So a little bit, I'm not going to duplicate the introductions. So this is me, Jenny. Glad to be here. So our agenda for today, as you see, we are going to go through a handful of things. So I've got about 7 or 8 points that I want to make in our half hour together. So and thank you for confirming, Grace, that you can see the presentation. I appreciate that. So defining what kind of change I'm talking about, because when you say the word change management, it can mean a lot of different things. I'm going to talk about organizational change management, enterprise change management, just a slight tiny bit on frameworks. We're not going to dive into frameworks today. Why humans respond differently to change, um, different types of change management deliverables. I'm trying to help you think maybe a little bit differently than you might have thought yesterday about what a project manager could or should do. Spots to embrace change in a PMO rhythm, coaching through resistance, and from alignment to impact. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of an action recap for you guys, some action taking resources for you to take away. And then hopefully we'll have about 5 minutes at the end where I can possibly address questions that you guys may have in the chat. So what kind of change am I talking about today? Because the word change management is a broad topic that may get overused, right? So we've got here understanding the difference. So you've got enterprise change management as a vertical, and then you've got organizational change management as a vertical. And they both have different purposes. They have different meanings. And for the purposes of today, if you can shift your mindset and put on the hat of organizational change management. As you see here, I'm talking about at that project or program level of practice. You see some of the differences in scope here. The purpose, enabling the people to adopt the change, not necessarily a big governance model, things of that nature. The ownership, the PMO or the project team or with the change lead instead of that central change office, if you're just kind of comparing the differences between the two. Of course, there are many more differences. This is just at that highest level. So the lens that I would like for you to look through today is more on that organizational change management side. So OCM lives where people meet process, right? And that's where PMOs either win or lose. So I'll leave you with that. ECM is that enterprise muscle, and then OCM is more on that delivery and execution. Knowing which one you're solving for keeps your approach focused, because I caution us as a community to be careful about using OCM and ECM as interchangeable, because they're really not. So the action that I would encourage you guys to do, each slide will have an action, is clarify whether you're driving enterprise capability or project level adoption. You might be doing a little bit of hybrid of both, but they have their own lens to look through, if that makes sense. So that's the lens I'd like for you to wear today, OCM. So let's talk about frameworks. Not going to dive deep into this. We could do a whole session on frameworks. And there's many frameworks out there, right? And we aren't trained on these things from PMI, right? Different ways to approach change, right? You could be talking about the ProSci ADCAR model. We could talk about Cotter's model. We could talk about Change Management Institute. That's a little bit more popular on the other side of the hemisphere. And they have, instead of their PMBOK, they have their SIMBOK, right? And so, and they each have a place, a different core focus. As you'll see here, with ProSci, it's where success hinges on that personal adoption and behavior change. So that might be a good framework to use if you're looking at that. Cotter's is a little bit of a different model where it really focuses on enterprise-wide transformation. So that might be a good tool to use there. SIMBOK is a little bit more simplified than the two above, and it uses a little bit more smart neighbor friendly language as opposed to like ADCAR and things of that nature. And it is ideal when your PMO is seeking consistency and repeatability. So just something to think about when we're thinking about, okay, so we're talking about organizational change management, and we're looking at it through the lens of there are some frameworks that we could use. And you may say, well, we don't use any of those. Okay, that's not a bad answer either. It's just being aware that there are some tools that could help you. But if you don't have a tool, then just to be aware of some of the things that I'm about to introduce. So an action for you guys on this one is select a framework or pieces of them. Like I said, you don't have to be all of them or a full one. That fit your context, and then blend those elements in to fill the gaps where you might have gaps in leadership or structure or individual adoption. So that's a potential action that you guys could possibly benefit from. So here's where the rubber meets the road. Oftentimes I have found, at least in my travels, I have built and or transformed. I think I'm in PMO number 10 now. I'm at BAE Systems. Today, helping with their project management function, and great team here. So I think I'm in PMO number 10. So I think a lot of times as project management professionals, whether your title is project manager, portfolio manager, program manager, or fill in the blank, you might have several different job titles, but the function is still the same. At the end of the day, what we should be experts at is leading change. That's what we do. Because, like, if you try to explain to your grandmother what you do, you say, "Hey, I do project management." She may not know what that means, but you can say, "Hey, grandma, I lead change." She can catch up with that, right? So, but the way that humans respond to change, and I'm about to give you some data, some facts, some FACTS, some facts. If you're familiar with the DISC behavior and communication model, and there's many, right? There's different types of assessments for this, but DISC is one that I'm favorable toward, and it shares with us something very, very important. So you as change leaders, if you don't already know this, you can put this in your back pocket. As you see here, you've got DISC stands for dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. And what that means is this might be whatever your primary, whether you're a D, an I, an S, or a C, as far as the way you primarily naturally prefer to behave and communicate. The staggering information here is that D's and I's here across the top, they are only 30% of the human population. I think the last time I checked this was last year, and the population was like the data was compiled from 40 million assessments or something worldwide, globally. And these people, the D's and I's, only 30% of the human population, they are more apt to run toward change or be more natural to accept change. Notice the word is natural, whereas the steady folks, the S's or the C's, that's 70% of the human population, they might need more time, more clarity. They prefer stability. So, it's not that they can't accept change, they just may have to adapt differently. Maybe it's not natural, maybe it's more adaptive. People process change at different speeds. Organizational change management can pace that with readiness, because let's be honest, change fatigue is real, right? It can be real. And that change fatigue sets in when change outpaces capacity, right? So, organizational change management can help to keep you from outrunning your people, right? So the reason I put this slide up here, this could be a whole presentation in and of itself, is that, identify within your organization and your stakeholders who might need more reinforcement versus more change, right? So I think a lot of times we forget that 70% of our population might need a little bit more time to accept the change. So I thought this was a helpful slide. I hope you find it helpful as well. All right. So you guys are probably thinking, okay, Jenny, bring this together. You've given us some information, so bring this together. Why do I care? Yes, we're doing project management and we have our deliverables. Why do I care? Where might be some gaps? What are some things that OCM, change management, might bring in that a project manager may not naturally do? So this is the slide for you. How project management and change management can work together. I think most of the people on this call likely don't have the luxury of having a project manager and a change manager. If a lot of large programs might warrant a project manager and a change manager, maybe multiple, depends on, if it's a multi-year initiative, multi-million or billion-dollar budgets or what have you. But sometimes those of you that are running, and those will be considered extra large projects, but those of you that are running large and or medium projects, maybe the project manager might be expected to do both, to do the change management and the project management, or the program manager, or what have you. So I kind of just put up here a waterfall example. It doesn't have to be waterfall. Framework is not relevant in this. It could be for agile or waterfall, but I want to try to start bringing some light to some things that might get overlooked or are assumed when we're going through this life cycle. So typically your project manager, the lane that you see in the middle, the project manager, typical things. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Charter, business case, project plan, schedule, status reports, risk logs, fill in the blank. We do these things, right? These are the things that, we PMBOK We got it. We've learned these things. We know how to do these things. And if you're agile, this might look different, right? This might look like epics and stories, assuming it's Scrum or SAFe or something. Epic stories. We have backlogs. We have stand-ups. We have our things that we do. So let's pretend like that's the middle column. Some of the things that may not have the amount of rigor that I think it should have is around those change management deliverables. Now you say, well, Jenny, we already do a stakeholder register over here. We've got that. Stakeholder analysis and stakeholder register are two different things, right? You're evaluating your stakeholders, and it leads down into your change management plan on how are those stakeholders going to be impacted, what communication might they need for the change, not communication throughout the project. That's your communication plan that you would typically do, the communication and or the training they may need if they are impacted by the change. And the case for change, trying to help people to understand the why, the what's in it for them, um, and your change strategy, how and your communications plan. Your communications plan on the right side is different than the left side. The communications plans is what type of marketing teasers are you going to send out? How are you going to get your end users ready, whoever's going to be using the whatever that you're doing? How are you going to get them excited about it? How have you interviewed them to see where your change resistors might be? That type of thing. Because the project manager builds a solution. The change management portion ensures that people use it. Let's say it's software development. Project manager says product was put in production at the end of October, done. Warranty period, end of November, done. Project is complete. Nowhere even close. Because if no one uses it and it doesn't meet the needs, then the project is not a success. Some people might want to argue with me on that, and that's okay. I would love to have that healthy debate with you, but you really got to look at the adoption of the tool or the thing or the outcome or the deliverables that you've given. Are they easy for people to use? Did it meet the benefit that it was supposed to? Those types of things. Now we're getting into benefits realization and strategy realization. That's a different topic. But these things should run in parallel. They're not a sequence. And yes, it's still, as I said, this applies to agile. Um, but as you see here, the adoption metrics. We're going to talk a little bit more about adoption metrics, but that's important. Just because it's in production and the warranty period is done, I would like for us to identify very early what are those adoption metrics. Because a lot of times we want to define success early in our project management life cycle. We want to define success, but where is that adoption metric? Success is going to look like this when it's in production, warranty period, no defects. I'm just using software development. It could be construction or what have you. But if you build a building, if we're doing construction, for example, if you build a building and it passes all your codes and we're ready for fill in the blank, but yet maybe it's a lease. You're building a building and it's a lease building, but yet nobody leases the building because it doesn't meet their needs. Was it a success? The building's standing, but no one's using it. So, right. So the goal was to get someone to use the building. So the adoption was not good, right? So a different way of thinking. So an action for you, integrate some of these OCM deliverables. You don't have to do them all. Adoption metrics would be the main one. Adoption metrics, and then how are you going to communicate with people and how are you going to make sure that people are trained? The training plan might be on the left side, maybe. But those would be some that I think you just can't live without, right? So think about integrating some of these things and raising your own bar as it relates to change management within project management. So that's why I spent a little bit more time on this particular slide. So I think what we've done in the past, at least in my travels, what I've seen is change management is like a checkbox on the project management something or another, whatever artifact that is. And I think that happens, that checkbox mentality happens when no one owns the adoption, right? The adoption of the project. Because, in the older years, right? And I'm dating myself a little bit. In the older years when we were thinking about on time, on track, on budget, and we were thinking about, getting the project live and past the warranty period, did I care about adoption as much as I likely should have? And humbly, I'll admit, no, right? And so luckily I've grown from that because I want someone to actually use the fill in the blank or whatever it is that we're building. So when change management becomes a checkbox, we assign an action you could do. You could assign a clear adoption owner. Like how, when you say we create adoption metrics, who's going to help you do that? Who's going to own those? Because it's likely not the project manager. Likely not. You could build some micro learning into your meetings or your stand-ups or what have you. You could highlight some early adopters. You want to find those. I've done another session before on invisible influencers, right? You could find those influencers and start getting that buzz around of the good things that are going to happen. It's not all about emailing, right? You can coach some of your key leaders that are going to be heavily impacted by this change to where they can be some of your cheerleaders, if you will, or to start modeling that, hey, this is coming and we're excited about it. Readiness checkpoints, right? That's different than project readiness. This is really more geared around adoption, training, communications, that type of thing. And then your stakeholder readiness, maybe it is a log, maybe it isn't, but just to make sure that the function is happening. Are we making sure, how ready are the people? How are they accepting the change? Because remember that 70% of people, that's who you're really gearing towards, that 70% of those humans that may struggle a little bit. But spot the checkbox, because if there is no checkbox, then we're, because a lot of times we think with that checkbox mentality, but if we don't have an owner, we're not measuring, and then we have no adoption, and then the project will not be a success. So an action item that I encourage for you guys: audit a current project, and is adoption of whatever project you audit, and it might just be one that you're running now. Is the adoption owned and measured? Ask yourself that question. That might be just the key takeaway that you take today. So we want to make sure that ownership and visibility change is led, that it is not logged. So, we have these check boxes, but I want to make sure that we're leading the right things. It's not about the check boxes. It's about leading the right things. This is a good slide. You should save this one. So change resistance. Your change resistors, you might even call them negative Nellies, or the people that we're never going to win over. I don't view it that way. Resistance is data. If we have change resistors, they're not defying. It's not defiance. It's just they want to understand more. They want to understand what's in it for them. They are trying to connect their why with the new why and trying to figure out how that goes together. And so that just needs some time. And a lot of times I think we don't budget the time into our plans for that. So listening builds trust. I think that's important. And every time you coach with curiosity, you can turn that friction into feedback, right? Because it doesn't have to be friction. So a thing that I say a lot, I in my journey, and I think it's true for most people in their journey, we don't like for change to be done to us. We prefer to have change done with us, right? So resistance is not defiance, it's information. Listen first, reframe, well, you need to do this, and say, well, how can we, and listen, here, ask those open-ended questions, and spot early when people just don't have a lot to say, they're avoiding, or there might be some over-compliance things, spot those early, because those might be some of your resistors, right? This may not come natural to some folks, but practicing that curiosity, that empathy, that patience, and reinforce the small wins to reduce fatigue, because most companies right now are experiencing a lot of change with the digital transformations, with the artificial intelligence, fill in the blank. I mean, there's a ton of change going on, across the globe. And so an action that I have for you guys is maybe host one 15-minute listen session where you don't speak. You might ask some open-ended questions, but you listen to understand. We're not trying to persuade. We're not trying to convince. We're just listening. And that is a cornerstone to building trust. So there's an idea for you. We're going to be opening up the floor here in about 4 minutes for some questions, but I've got a few more things. Embedding change into PMO rhythms. You can use the cadence that you already have, but your dashboards and your governance can drive culture if you treat adoption as a standing agenda item. So add the number one bullet, second most important thing that I could have for you today. Add an adoption metric to your dashboards, to your status reports. Because you could be on time and on track and on budget, timeline look good, but you can tell that the early adoption is not going well, the feedback is not going well, your gut is telling you that people, you're hearing the noise where people aren't happy. That could be a recipe for disaster. You think, well, I got it in production on time. That's not what we're aiming for here. There's done, and then there's done, and the done is when it's adopted. So that's a takeaway that you could do, is add that adoption metric to your dashboards or status reports. And there's a couple of other things here. The one thing that I can highlight here is spotting those early adopters. Those can be, those influencers out there for you can be the make or break. So that's a tip that I have for you there. This next one here, some practical tactics, some things that you could potentially do. Coaching is leadership in motion, right? That's what it is. I'll say that again. Coaching is leadership in motion. Coach your sponsors to stay visible, to build, help you to build those peer networks, and use language that invites people in. So for example, with ProSci, I caution us that are ProSci to be careful with the language that we learn there, because it doesn't always translate to smart neighbor language. And then people just feel like they're hearing jargon and they shut down. So just still, I'm listening. I actually just glance it. I see, is there a sound problem? Kimberly, I see where you said you can still hear. Okay. And then Tim. Okay. So, I just caution us. I'm not saying anything bad about ProSci. It's a good framework, but just make sure that the language that you use is in a language that other people can understand, right? Because we do have smart neighbors. They are smart. They just may not be ProSci or what have you. So, and some other tips here on this one, train some of your managers or some of your other stakeholders to be change champions for you, change coaches, change champions, right? And the key thing here is ask people, if you find those resistors, just ask them, what would help you to feel ready? And listen. And then hopefully you can accommodate for some of those things. It may not be exactly the way they want, but you can maybe meet in the middle. So action here that I have, build a small peer ambassador network before your next initiative, those influencers, those invisible influencers, and see how that could potentially help you. So I'm going to just spend a second on here, from alignment to impact. So plans align strategy. The people are the ones who deliver it, right? And we're talking, all of this is about people and the way people are going to react to whatever change you're trying to drive toward them. So when language and leadership match the intent, trust and impact will follow. Trust and impact will follow. So, I put some tips in here, that where you can use adoption dashboards. We talked about that a little bit. Feedback loops, have some way of constant feedback loops, and instead of it being so formal, maybe you could find a way for that to be a little more informal. And you could do something simple as the action here. Add a 10-minute alignment check to one of your next big meetings. So whether it's a portfolio meeting or a program meeting, just to say, hey, are we aligned? How's adoption going? What are some early things that you're hearing? Just put these things into your vocabulary, because it may not be natural from the way you were trained as a traditional project manager. So this is a recap. I'm not going to go over all these, but these are this is each slide that we went over. And everything that you see on here, you think, oh, this is more stuff for us to do. Actually, it's not. These aren't new deliverables. the new habits. These are things that I think we know we should do, but we just don't plan to do them sometimes. So pick one just pick one for tomorrow and embed it into your PMO rhythm. So I'll end you with, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I put a lot of Jennyisms up a good bit. So change isn't a work stream. It's the work. It's embedded into the work. It's not another thing that you have to do. So clarity turns change from activity into adoption. So thank you. Here's my connection information for my company, strategyinfluenceconsulting.com. And you are welcome to connect to me on LinkedIn. So I said we would leave some room open for questions. So I am happy, since I can't hear anybody, I'll just have to talk through it. So let's see. There's a Q&A area. Is that what I was seeing earlier? Use the Q&A space. Q&A. Perfect. I'm there. So Johnson has a question. How can PMOs balance change pace, engage all adopter types, and make adoption measurable, not just a checkbox, especially in hybrid or agile projects? So this is a really good one. So I'll answer from kind of like from the bottom up. So make adoption measurable. So I think you have to go back to when you go back to the very beginning and you guys are putting together, and there's a couple of different ways to answer this question. So I'll just give a simple one. When you are at the point to where maybe you're writing your charter, or maybe you don't call it charter anymore, and we've gotten a little bit more new age and scope documents or what have you, or business case, and you say, okay, so here's the business case, but how do we know that we were successful? Like what is that adoption? We put the software out and we say that we want half the country using it, or we want how many signed in users do we want, are we doing some type of usability, fill in the blank surveys or what have you. So we've got to get past the getting it into production or getting it built to, well, what does that look like? And just having those good conversation and asking the why 5 times, right? And getting down, and there's some standard, adoption metrics that you guys can Google or Chat GPT or what have you. But, just having those conversations with the right stakeholders early, not when you're in testing and you're almost ready for UAT, not there, very, very early. So, and I think and so there's adoption metrics throughout the project, and then there's adoption metrics after the project goes live, if you want to get a little bit more intermediate instead of beginner. And, just have frequent conversations about those. So thank you for the question. Okay, Edward, change fatigue is real. How do you recommend defining what done looks like from an OCM perspective, and how and when do you transition to continuous improvement? So I think what this question is asking is, hey, the project manager can't be assigned to this forever, right? And you are correct. That's why I said some folks have a project manager and a change manager, and a project manager typically would be unassigned after the warranty period is over. But you notice how earlier I said, adopt some change champions, train the change champions, because whoever you're delivering these things to that are going to become the owner of the product, the business sponsor, the business owner, those are the people that should continue to track those metrics. It wouldn't be the PMO. Typically, not saying that it can't be, but in my travels, that's just how I've seen it. But you've coached them up and you've trained them to where they know how to do it. And then as the change champion, you might check in with them quarterly just to see how's this going, right? Because that's how, a PMO says that they've successfully implemented 200 projects this year. And I just scratched my head and I'm like, but did they work? So that's where you need to check back in. The adoption, if we have adoption after the first year of fill in the blank, then the project was a success. That's what I want to hear. Not did we put in X number of projects this year. So I hope that was helpful, Edward. Okay, probably got time for one more. Oh, thank you, Johnson. I appreciate that. So I think my time is up at 11. So Tony, I think folks will be able to end with you. But again, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I really appreciate everyone joining today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions for the today. I'm sure there's a lot of great things that you can glean from throughout the conference.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Jenny? So we're at time and we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Up next, we'll hear from Tim Rumbaugh, who will be presenting AI is not your next step, but get your house in order first. Thank you, guys.